Welcome to the Deep Dive. Ready to jump headfirst into global finance and economics with me today?
Always ready. Think of it as a cheat sheet for those conversations about the global economy, whether you're at a business meeting or just, out with friends.
Exactly. We're going through these morning headlines. It's like our own little Wall Street news feed, right? Our mission to kind of cut through the noise and figure out what really matters.
Uncover the hidden gems, you could say. Connect those seemingly random events.
See, you get it. Okay. Market movers first. Tech stocks, they're on fire today, pushing the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ to, new record highs. Tesla, up over 3%, Meta, over 3% as well. It's a tech party. But what's driving this? And is it going to last?
The classic question. It looks like, just good old investor excitement on the surface. But there's a bit more to it, I think.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, you've got genuine innovation happening, especially in things like AI and cloud computing. And investors are really betting on these companies for future growth.
So it's not just hype. There's some real momentum behind it.
Yeah.
But are there risks?
Always. One risk is that, this excitement could turn into a bubble. Valuations getting out of whack with the fundamentals, we've seen that before. And it doesn't always end well. And of course, the things driving this growth, low interest rates, lots of cash flowing around, those things could change.
Got it. So we need to watch for those warning signs. Now, things aren't quite as rosy across the pond, are they? French assets under pressure, all this political uncertainty, the whole Le Pen situation and the no confidence vote, it's shaking things up. What's the market telling us about the fallout, do you think?
Well, think of the bond market as a mood ring for investors, right?
Okay, I like that analogy.
What we're seeing is the gap between French and German 10-year government bonds widening. Basically, investors want more return on French bonds compared to, say, the safety of German bonds. It's a risk premium because of all the political uncertainty.
So it's like the market saying, France is a bit riskier now, so we need a little extra just in case.
Exactly. And you see it in the euro tumbling almost 1% too. It's fascinating how sensitive these signals are, reflecting these little shifts in confidence. Asian markets, they're catching that tech optimism wave though. European markets are mixed. Probably a combination of those French jitters and just the overall global situation.
Speaking of which, let's talk about those economic signals. We're getting some interesting, maybe even confusing signals from the Fed. Governor Waller is warning that, progress on curbing inflation may be stalling, but then you have Williams hinting at more rate cuts. So are they tightening or loosening? Hard to say.
It's a tug of war, isn't it? The hawks versus the doves. It's creating a lot of uncertainty. The hawks, like Waller, they're all about inflation, keep those rates higher to cool things down. But the doves, like Williams, they're worried about keeping the economy growing, so they might be open to cuts.
So predicting their next move, it's like trying to read tea leaves, huh?
Pretty much. And depending on which way they go, the consequences for the economy are significant. Then you have the ECB. It seems like they're changing gears a bit, moving away from purely data-dependent decisions.
That's a pretty big shift.
It is. This forward guidance, it's about trying to guide the markets more directly, signaling their intentions. Some might see it as confidence in the economic outlook. Others might see it as them trying to get ahead of any potential problems, being proactive.
So good sign, maybe. Or maybe they know something we don't. Just adds another layer to this whole economic puzzle. Let's look at specifics, though. Construction spending in the U.S. is up. That seems like a good thing. And manufacturing PMI, it's getting slightly better, but still showing contraction. Over in the U.K., house prices are surprisingly strong, but business confidence is, fading a bit. And in the Eurozone, unemployment is holding steady. It's a mixed bag. How do we even start to make sense of it all?
Right. It's rarely a clear picture. The U.S. construction spending, that's encouraging more investment in infrastructure and housing, but it could also push inflation up, if demand gets too far ahead of supply. That little improvement in manufacturing PMI, it's a glimmer of hope, but still in contraction territory.
So good signs, but some possible bumps in the road. What about the UK and Eurozone?
Well, the UK's housing market, the resilience there, it's interesting given all the economic uncertainty. It points to some underlying strength in the sector, but that dip in business confidence, it says something about what people are thinking about the future. And that stable unemployment in the Eurozone, that's somewhat reassuring, but we need to watch for any signs of weakness in the labor market. It's a tough balancing act for policymakers, trying to fight inflation without stalling growth.
No easy answers there. Let's switch gears to the corporate world. The Intel CEO shakeup, it's all over the news. Gelsinger out. The board lost faith in his turnaround plan. Pretty dramatic, right? Are they in deeper trouble than we realized?
It's definitely a big deal. They've been facing some intense competition, companies like TSMC, and the sudden change, it kind of shows how urgent things are for the board. They probably want a more aggressive approach to get that market share back. Will it be enough? Time will tell, I guess.
It's a reminder of how fast things change at the top, especially in tech. Then you have Supermicro cleared of misconduct, and their stock is, well, taking off.
It shows how much power company-specific news has, It can even overshadow everything else that's going on in the market. For Supermicro, that uncertainty is gone. Investors are happy.
Perception versus reality, right?
Right.
Speaking of which, let's talk Tesla. Elon Musk's pay package rejected again by a judge, and SpaceX might be thinking about a share sale with a valuation that's, well, kind of out of this world.
It all comes together, doesn't it? Corporate governance, the role of these big CEOs, the whole space industry booming.
Yeah.
That scrutiny on Musk's compensation, it taps into those bigger worries about income inequality, executive pay.
It's interesting how those companies and their leaders become symbols of the big issues we're grappling with.
Mm-hmm.
What about that SpaceX share sale? What does that mean for the space industry?
I think it means the private space industry is growing up, attracting big money. SpaceX, they're pushing boundaries with space exploration and technology, but it also raises questions, right? The commercialization of space, the role of government versus private companies in this new frontier.
Yeah, whole new world indeed. Okay, before we get lost in space, let's touch on some global headlines. NATO warning President-elect Trump about being too friendly with Russia. The U.S. is tightening the screws on China's access to chip technology, and tensions between Israel and Hamas, well, they're escalating. It's a lot.
It's a volatile world we live in, that's for sure. That NATO message, it highlights the tension with Russia, the need for a firm stance from the U.S. and China, that tech rivalry, it's heating up. The Biden administration is taking strong measures to stay on top in those key areas. Semiconductors, AI.
So those tech restrictions, it's not just about economics then. It's about, national security and who has the power.
Exactly. And the Middle East, it's still a very fragile situation, like we're seeing with Israel and Hamas. All of this, the geopolitics, it has the potential to really impact global markets, the economic outlook.
We've got a lot to think about, don't we? Potential economic problems, political uncertainty in Europe, global tensions rising, the tech sector both booming and facing challenges. Out of all of that, what's the most interesting story for you today?
I'd say that Intel CEO shakeup, that one really stands out. It's not just about one company. It's kind of a mini version of the bigger challenges facing U.S. tech, the competition, the innovation, the geopolitics of it all. The new leadership at Intel, their decisions are going to be felt throughout the tech world, even beyond that.
It shows that even the big players can stumble, right? And that being able to adapt, that's crucial in this fast-changing environment. What about for you? What story grabbed your attention today?
I keep thinking about that story about Michael Sullivan, the man who spent almost 30 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit.
Right. The one who was exonerated by DNA evidence. It's incredible. Heartbreaking. I mean, he lost so much of his life.
It's a human story, isn't it? Reminds us that behind all the market stuff, the geopolitical stuff, there are real people affected. That payout he received, it's a step toward justice.
It makes you think about how many others might be out there wrongfully convicted. It shows how our justice system, well, it's not perfect.
It is a powerful reminder, for sure. We need to keep striving for fairness and accountability no matter what.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot of ground: tech stocks, political drama, the complicated global economy. It's a lot to take in, but that's what we do here on The Deep Dive. We connect the dots, look for the trends, and hopefully get some interesting conversations going.
And sometimes it's those stories that seem small, like Michael Sullivan's, that have the biggest impact.
They remind us about the human side of things, the individual lives caught up in these big global forces.
And they make us look beyond the headlines, think about the ethics of what we're doing, both individually and together as a society.
Yeah, it's powerful. It really brings it home, doesn't it? Even with all the market talk and, global politics, these stories ground us, reminds us that it's not all abstract. It affects real people.
Right. There's a human story behind every headline, every data point. Sometimes those stories make you rethink the systems, the structures we kind of take for granted.
That's what I like about these deep dives, I think. It's not just the news. It's trying to figure out what it all means, the bigger forces at work,
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even about finding all the answers. It's about asking the right questions, the ones that get you thinking in new ways about these complicated issues.
So as we wrap up, what's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners get from all of this?
Connecting the dots, I think. We've seen how things that seem totally separate, like tech stocks going up, political stuff, even individual stories of injustice, they're all linked in these weird ways. Being able to see that bigger picture, understanding what's going on beneath the surface, it makes us more informed, more engaged.
More empowered, too, I'd say. It's about looking past the headlines and asking, what's the real story here? What are the consequences, big and small? It's about the human impact of all these global trends and realizing that we play a part in shaping the future.
Exactly. And being open to different perspectives, questioning what we think we know, having those good conversations that help us make sense of it all.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive, everyone. We hope you learned something new, maybe sparked some curiosity, even some good debates around the dinner table.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep those questions coming, and keep diving deep.